Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Bar2. Joining me today is...
The Geek for Fun.
Indeed. No Steve Backseat today because his internet decided to commit seppuku. Am I allowed to say seppuku? Is that one of those ones where I'm going to get shadow banned?
No, I think you'll be fine.
I watched someone do a little short video the other day, and he actually said the word Nazi. And I was like, you can't do that.
Damn.
We were talking about history, but he actually said it. I was like, whoa, I'm not used to that anymore. I'm used to people's stupid self-censoring. Anyway.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah, we're off topic already. So Alfie picked our discussion topic tonight. What are we talking about, Alfie? Rapid Nazis, I dare you. I fucking dare you.
Today we're going to be talking about what we should do to Nazis, and that's fight scenes.
Golf clap.
Yeah, so the thing we talk about a lot on this is just kind of like how we do action, and we normally mention a lot of things, and me and Ian specifically have actually written, probably at this point, like fucking dozens of fight teams together, if not actually 100. So it's kind of interesting to kind of break them down as a specific form of storytelling, what works, what gets you pumped, what doesn't work, how they can be used in a way that isn't even about the fight. Like, it's kind of a topic that at first seems kind of like meatheady, and of course it is, but I think there is a kind of a specific craft to a good fight scene that doesn't get talked about or appreciated enough. At least in a lot of the mediums we talk about, like comics and stuff. I think there's a kind of a code there that you can explore in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny you mentioned like meatheady, but sometimes it's not. And I just remember, I don't know why this is the thing that popped in my head the second you said that, but I remember shortly after the first Arkham game came out, seeing that someone was doing a review of Arkham Asylum, Serious House and Serious Earth by Grant Morrison, and talking about how it's in a lot of ways the inspiration for the game. And then someone just in the comments goes, does it have any good fights in it? And they're like, I guess kind of Killer Croc, but it's not really that kind of book. it took me a minute because I'm like, yeah, I mean, it literally is a fight scene between Batman and Killer Croc, but you don't really think about it in those terms because, yeah, it's just not that kind of book. But yeah, that doesn't mean that, like, a fight scene can't be in quote-unquote that kind of book. You can't have, like, it's weird to think about because they are kind of, or they can be very base and kind of meat-headed and stupid, or they can be like the focal point of the story where everything that's going on subtextually just comes to a head, and now it's becoming literalized. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned of Batman there is interesting as well, because like I feel like Batman as a character for the longest time was a really good example of kind of like a false promise, where Batman up until I want to say at least the Nolan trilogy, and we can talk about the weaknesses of it there, wasn't really seen as like a fight character, was seen as an action hero for sure, but more in the vein of like a James Bond than someone that was known for taking people down efficiently. Because he gets in plenty of fight scenes in those movies, but you could never really see him as like a master martial artist in the same way he is in the comics. And then once you get to Nolan, there's a lot of thought put into that, and then the execution of it, no, maybe not as interesting as the rest of those movies for sure. And then when you get to BVS, it's better as they go for sure. I like those Bane fights. But then you get to BVS, and what I think is interesting is the very first thing they shot for that movie was the warehouse fight scene. Because kind of the thing they pitched for the reason why they're bringing Batman into this is like, I want to show Batman fight as we've always imagined him being able to fight on the screen. And I think that's interesting that a character can be so closely tied to that as an aspect of themselves, and yet work completely fine without it. You know, just like it feels like that's just like a really weird thing that how Batman interacts with things would have such an impact.
Yeah, no, I can see that, because it's funny that BVS is like so closely compared to the Arkham games with the way Batman moves and fights in that. And it's not that I have a problem necessarily with that like move set, but it's not my preferred way for Batman to fight. I think that's something that like works a lot better within the context of a video game than it does within like than at least I would prefer to see on film. Because like in a video game you don't want to at least consistently just be moving through enemies, because then it gets really boring. You want that challenge, so you want to feel a little bit more vulnerable. And so translating that into film, Batman's of course, very vulnerable, but I don't necessarily want him to be that late in career, that vulnerable to that kind of enemy. Very, like, particular things. So I'd prefer to see something more of like the stealth takedowns, or just the make it look more effortless kind of thing. I'm trying to think of like a good example. I feel like there's some Bruce Lee movies where he does that, where he just like walks in the room and just kicks everyone's ass and doesn't like break a sweat kind of thing.
It's kind of the difference between Jackie Chan versus Bruce Lee, where Jackie Chan is always, every single fight, exerting like all of his effort, no matter what opponent is, whereas Bruce Lee is very clearly like, I'm walking through these guys until I get to a mini boss.
Yep. Yeah. And so that kind of vibe that gives off is just distinct. Because like don't get me wrong, I do like to see Batman struggle. It is part of the thing, but especially when you put him in a movie where he's supposed to be fighting Superman, that's the fight. Like, is it weird to me that I think the warehouse fight looks like he's putting in more effort than the Superman fight in that same movie?
Yeah, and that's interesting as well, because we can kind of segue this into kind of like when a fight scene and how a character fight can tell you about a character, and if you have any really favorite examples of that where like it kind of like symbolizes a moment of growth or whatever, because they talk about that in the commentary, that the reason for that is because again, Superman, Batman's kind of like hollowed out and is just kind of angry, whereas in the warehouse he's kind of back to his youthful like, I'm a fucking hero, I'm here to save someone energy. So he's meant to be revitalized kind of a way. It's that like the rain on my chest is a baptism moment. Is this how they described it? So, and I think maybe it doesn't come across as clearly, but like the idea there, I think, sound.
Yeah, no, I could see that idea, but I don't know, like that's far from the level of thought I've put into the movie at this point. Right. I haven't watched it since release ? I think I maybe.
Damn, that's over 10 years.
Yeah, I think I maybe watched on initial Blu-ray release once for the extended cut, and that was about it. I was just kind of done with it point. Um,
That's extremely valid.
yeah. So I don't know, but other examples of like fight scenes and stuff. It's interesting because I feel like medium matters a lot here. Something that looks cool or is interesting in a video game versus an animated presentation, whether that be anime or cartoon movie or whatever, versus live action, are very distinct. Like, Leah kind of got it on a bit of a Supergirl kick, so we rewatched Batman Superman Apocalypse the other night. And just that fucking dark side fight at the end of that is so fucking cool. And balls to the wall.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It's honestly probably like the best animated DC fight. I hate to say it because I really like the Wonder Woman versus the Furies fight in that as well, but it's just like the whole time you're just like, where the fuck is Mon Pocket? What's happening? Oh, it's only missing Darkseid sitting on the couch, like, and he clearly was sitting on the couch waiting for them to come home, but
Yeah, I just got tired of it and just decided to
they
open
were
the
just
door
lingering
himself.
at the door for too long. He got up from the couch.
Exactly.
Yeah. But like that fight scene looks really, really good, and I'm sitting there the other day, I'm kind of thinking, in preparation for this episode, I'm like, would something like that work in live action? Like, maybe, but at the same time, there's just so much like stylization to it that I'm not entirely sure that that kind of fight would translate and choreograph well in live action, because the amount of exaggeration you can do in animation, and to a lesser extent things like comics and games, but I think animation gets away with it the most. The amount of exaggeration you can do in animation just looks kind of wrong if you put it into quote-unquote live-action CG animation. Because, like, you've seen some of those, like, ridiculous CG videos where they start to take the characters and just, turn the violence up to 11 for a fight scene or whatever. And when you do, like, that level of cartoony violence, it just kind of breaks down, and it's why it's a problem I think a lot of, like, the Marvel movies have had, where they just decide to go full CG for some of the fights, and the characters just stop looking believable. It stops being dramatic, and it starts to like go into just silly. And it's probably not entirely just because it looks bad. It looks like CG at that point, but it's the movements, the more divorced from reality you get, the more silly and cartoony it looks, and then that just kind of looks wrong in this quote-unquote live-action setting. I think that's a big detriment to a lot of, like, epic fight scenes, I guess.
And I think to go to your example specifically, I think what gets a lot of people tripped up with that type of choreography is two factors. I think the flight is really hard for people to fly and punch at the same time in live action and make it look good. I think that's something that you either have to do a completely CG shot, and then it either has to be extremely detailed, which is often kind of inefficient because it's going to be moving so fast anyway to sell the impact. So you kind of don't want to have your animators spend that much time on half a second of a shot, right? To make that specific thing look good when it's kind of be blurry and a thing. And then the other way to do it is to have them do it practically, and then they're on wires, and then is the other actor on wires, and then you have to not only practice choreographing that, you have to practice working with the wires, then doing it in a way where the wires don't cross over each other when the actors are moving with each other. And you start getting all extra things to it, where it does start to become insanely limiting. The one thing I think you can do is you can either do one of those elements or the other one, but you can't do both at the same time. Like, I feel like the final scene at the end in Man of Steel, when they're fighting each other in the sky and stuff, I think is a lot weaker than the earlier scene in Smallville, where they're more on the ground and you can actually get some hand-to-hand choreography going on now with the power and stuff. I think that looks a lot better, and it flows a lot better, and it feels more impactful than the time they're just kind of CG blobs like smashing into each other. Then you kind of lose me a little bit. And then you compare it to animation, where flying and punching is all Dragon Ball is. That rocks. But that's something where I really think that would be the biggest hurdle to cross in a live action Dragon Ball Z movie. I think you'd see them on the ground a lot more. To make that kind of martial arts choreography, punches and kicks, quick movements, quick dodging, quick camera cuts work in a way without having the characters 50,000 feet in the air the whole time. And I think that's something where, from a character standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, you can do a lot by having characters have that moment of flight enlightenment in an action scene. I think The Matrix is a really good example of that, right? Where like him being able to fly with Neo is a big character moment, right? It's not just necessarily he can do extra things, it makes it different. And once you get into the sequels and once you can do flying, fighting, it turns up the scale in a way that feels appropriate for the characters. The same thing can be said once you go to stripping characters that are normally quite powerful to the ground. I think a good example of this would be if you use Captain America Civil War, that final fight scene where Iron Man and Captain America fight each other, and they're in one room, and they're just kind of wailing on each other, when previously in the movie they've done a lot more exaggerated stuff, and I think that can be a good way to inform how far people have fallen when it's just kind of this brutal drag-out thing. So there's ways to do it, it has been done, but I agree with you, where I feel like that specific level of stylization is probably best saved for animation. And it's one of animation's strengths, and you should rather lean in live action strengths rather than trying to just ape that, because it's always going to be a lesser version of it.
Yeah, and like live action has different things that it can display in fights that look a lot better. I think one of those things is just the, like when you slow-mo fight scenes, the thing that immediately comes to mind is like that Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes fight, where it's discombobulate,
Yes.
and like they do the slow-mo and slap, and you just see like all the ripples across the face. That's something that, like, conceptually, yeah, you could do that in animation, but it's not necessarily going to look as good as just, no, we just actually slapped the shit out of this dude and filmed it in like 5,000 frames per second or whatever. And it just looks so devastating to get slapped in the face that hard. And I think like you could just immediately relate to that more. Another good one is because of just the natural level of detail you get with film, of just showing damage to a person translates so much better in live action than it ever does in anything animated. Like you've seen, you know, in Dragon Ball, like Vegeta gets fucked up and like holding his arm, or Goku's bleeding, or got like gaping chest wound or whatever. And it looks gnarly, it looks brutal, and because it's animation, they can make the damage look worse than any actual damage you could do at a real person without going to like makeup or CG. But just like, I don't know, man, seeing someone get like bruised, and by like the end of the fight people are like sweating to death. I watched The Duelists, one of Ridley Scott's movies, the other day, and it's just about these two guys who have like this, they both fucking hate each other, and they keep getting into duels, and they keep ending very inconclusively, and there's just one of their duels, they're just in like this fucking dingy looking basement, like maybe like under a bridge or something, and like there's a bunch of drunk people around them just watching, and like you join the duel like almost at the end, so they're both exhausted, they're both like already all cut up and bleeding, and they're not even like holding their swords properly, they're just like dragging them on the ground, and they're only raising them either to attack or defend at the last possible second as they keep circling around each other. And it's just that like visceral brutality is something that's really hard to capture outside of live action, when you're filming people fighting.
I agree completely, because I think that's something where you really have to draw the hell out of a broken arm to sell it as painful in animation, whereas if you show just a bit of bone sticking out of someone in live action, you're gonna go, ooh, like it's just immediately just gonna be like, oh man, that looks painful. Like just viscerally, it's much easier to get that across.
Yeah.
Um, I think a good example of that specifically, if you look at something like with an adaptation like Watchmen, for example, where Watchmen
This is the Zack
does have
Snyder
fight scenes in
episode,
it.
apparently.
Well, it does have fight scenes in it. I'll move on from that though. I noticed that myself as soon as I said it. I didn't mean that. But the Watchmen thing, for example, look at Ozymandias has like his fight scene at the end there, and it's kind of meant to show how dominant he's been this entire time, not just mentally but physically. They can literally do nothing to him. There is no way they can get past this. And in the comic, it's kind of a quick sequence of panels. And then in the movie, it's more of like an elaborate fight scene, but they both end the same way. They both begin the same way. And I think immediately the idea of like, oh, that looks more violent when it's the exact same thing, just displayed in a different lens is kind of, it's interesting to see how much that like changes the context of something when you bring it out of the page into reality. Something else that I think kind of shows like the damage of things is the Rocky movie specifically will have so much damage caked on either Creed or Rocky himself throughout those movies, with the actors themselves being like, oh yeah, I should have lung during filming this, or I like have my face back up, just because we had to make it feel the impact of these hits had to match what this person was going through in their life up to that point. As kind of, you can only feel so much emotion for a film, and you can get to a point of like being really with that character, but fights and physical toll, I think, does a really good job of like putting a face to it, right? Like when you see Rocky's smashed up face at the end of Rocky 2 and he's screaming, Adrian, we did it, you know, you feel not just the fight he's been through, but the entire life he's led up to that point is on his face. And I think that's a really good illustration of like why when you do these fight scenes, letting them have impact, not letting it just be kicks and blocks and punches with superficial damage, you know, by letting these people have tracking hits. Our friend Mr. Fusion talks about this a lot with Dragon Ball, about when the Dragon Ball fights that don't hit as much for them are the ones where you can't track the damage. Whereas if you look at like the early Saiyan Saga fights, for example, every hit Vegeta takes, you can see it on his armor. Like it's very clear, easy to track, like every bit of impact that had a hit. And I think that's something to that. I do think there is something to, I don't think it's necessarily a strict hard and fast rule, but it can enhance a lot of character work.
No, for sure. One of the things that I'm starting to think about is when fight scenes, like when tone of the fight changes what you're able to do. So I talked about the Duelists, which is just this incredibly, because like any sword fight you've seen in a movie is probably like the worst possible strategies to use in an actual sword fight, right? Where it looks really impressive on film, but like if you do a spinning slash, you've turned your back to an opponent, you're going to get a lung punctured, right? Like in reality. So The Duelist is a really interesting film that attempts, I don't know how successfully, to scale things back and show the drama and the intrigue and just how scary being in a duel and just confronting things naturally would be. So you don't even have to watch the full movie to really understand the tone of this. If you just watch the first opening scene, the first fight, it's so goddamn intense, and they barely touch each other the whole time. But like that's the thing, is every little scratch is like millimeters away from death in that. Whereas another sword fight scene that comes to mind for me that is like literally you could not be further across the spectrum is the both of the iconic sword fights in Princess Bride. So you've got the first one with the Dread Pirate Scott versus Inigo Montoya, and they're just playing with each other, and you get like these fucking iconic moments. I must admit, you are better than me. Why, thank you. Ah, but you seem very calm. Ah, it's because I know something that you do not know. What's that? I am not left-handed. Switches sword hands, starts winning the fight. It's like, oh shit, that's so fucking cool. And then of course you got the iconic, my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die. Just like so fucking cool, but it's like just within this like really absurd, really over the top storytelling, fairy tale tongue-in-cheek context. Completely changes it, but at the same time those moments are so cool and so satisfying in a way that like wouldn't work. Like you could not put that same kind of interaction in the Duelists. It wouldn't work. It would feel laughable. But because you're in the context of, you know, a silly movie, suddenly it's fine and it's like it's camp and it's over the top, but that's what it allows itself to come all the way back around and be cool again.
No, I think that's a fantastic example.
Yeah, so like the tone of the fight can have just such a impact on the cool factor.
Have there only been any opposite examples for you where like you've been into something and then the fight, either the tone is like so serious it takes you out, or the fight gets too fantastical and all silly that it takes you out?
Okay, I have the exact example for this, but I'm not sure if you've seen this movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I keep wanting to say There Will Be Blood, and that's not the name of it, but that's just the name coming in my mind for some reason. Fuck, we did a whole episode on it too, and I can't remember the name of this goddamn movie now. They Live. They Live's the name of it. I don't know why There Will Be Blood came to mind. They both start with TH. So They Live is, I think that's the name of it, is this movie where they get a professional wrestler to play like the main character, so you kind of like already a little like unsure of how good the quality of the movie is going to be, but it just keeps, yeah, that's right, that is They Live. It just keeps like going and going, but you eventually get another professional wrestler, and they're both like contextualized to be construction workers, and there's this whole thing about putting on a pair of sunglasses lets you see that the earth has been like taken over by alien zombies or what the fuck ever, but if you don't put on the glasses you can't see. And so there's just this scene in an alleyway where the two guys, one guy's trying to get the other dude to put on some glasses to look at things, and the other dude just keeps saying no, and they fight for a whole 10 minutes doing professional wrestling moves just smack dab in the middle of this fucking movie. It's just a full, like, I think 8 or 10 minute fight scene of them just fucking wailing on each other, doing like the, you know, like the rock bottoms and just like the drops and like the lifts and all these crazy fucking stupid fight moves. And it's just the most like absurd and laughable thing. I remember when we did this movie for Geeky Gentleman, my takeaway was I felt like someone was writing this movie and then got up to go get a soda or a beer or whatever, and then like as they left the room, someone came in and like their like 12-year-old son came in and just like wrote a fucking fight scene into the script and then got away before their parent came back and continued writing this really serious and introspective commentary on like modern day consumerism, and then they just fucking like didn't notice and they left it in the movie somehow. Is
really
it is that drastic of a shift, and then like there's just so many moments like that where like the movie's pretty tongue-in-cheek, but it's also like talking about really interesting things, so it almost feels like a mistake that certain elements of this movie are still in it, because it's got the most iconic line in cinematic history: "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum."
Bubblegum, yeah.
Oh, fucking they live. Do you have an example of a movie where you think the tone of the film or the tone of the piece, doesn't have to be a movie, the tone of the piece doesn't match with the way that they filmed a fight?
There's a recent example which I'm kind of like I don't think this is bad. And I'll preface this with anyone who hasn't seen 28 Years Later, because it's quite a recent movie, so anyone that hasn't seen that and has interested in seeing it, feel free to turn off now. And I'm not going to go into super hyper specifics, but that movie is kind of like, there's some exaggeration to it, but it's kind of like a somber, like sad zombie movie, right? Mm-hmm. And then the end of it goes full on. The best way I could describe it is like Power Rangers backflips and like fight takedowns of zombies by blonde wig wearing British tracksuit people. And it's such a wild ass tonal shift that at the time it really took me out, but now I'm thinking of it, I'm kind of like, that's kind of awesome that they just randomly just did that. And it's gonna play into the sequel or whatever, but like that's probably anyone that's seen that will know is like that's probably the harshest fight tone shifts I've ever seen in my life. Like it went from like it's like if they just started doing that in Citizen Kane, you know, like it's just so wild in comparison.
All right, so we've talked about tone. I've talked a lot about like sword fights and stuff, and you've been talking more about like hand-to-hand stuff. Do you have a preference for the kind of fight you're gonna see? Like, do you not like when they pull out weapons in a fight, or do you prefer like hand-to-hand?
No, I'm normally here for the sword fights and stuff. I do feel like sword fights are a little bit more limited in what I've seen people do with them. And I think my biggest thing with that is I think the speed is something that gets lost a lot, because that's kind of what impresses me the most with fight choreography is the speed of the thing. Is how fast are these people moving, is what kind of sets apart a really interesting one for me versus just kind of like a standard one. For example, something that uses weapons really quickly is the John Wick movies. And by the time we get to the fourth John Wick movie, like they're moving so fluidly and so in tune. And Jackie Chan talked about this a little bit when he was doing his things about why his fight scenes were so much more impressive than the American ones. Is he's just like, anytime he worked with American stunt doubles and stuff, he always had to slow down when they hit them. And he's like, when he works with his in-house team, and like he can work at his full speed, and it looks sped up. It looks like it's this hyper thing. Honestly, the best sword fights I can think of all kind of come from the Star Wars movies. That's like the ones that impressed me the most, because specifically the sequence that was always stuck in my head is after Qui-Gon dies in Phantom Menace, when Obi-Wan just runs out against Maul, and they have like a 1 minute little exchange where they're just reading, countering, and they're moving so fast they had to slow the cameras down to keep up with them. And like that stuff's just so cool to me. That stuff has such impact on me, and for that universe specifically, it really sells kind of like the fact that these guys, the fight choreographer Nick Gillard, he talks about like, hey, if we're gonna accept the fact that these guys use a melee weapon in a universe with blasters, they should be really, really good with them. Because like otherwise, it kind of ruins the whole thing. You don't buy that these guys are so good with these swords that they can survive in this environment. And I think that seems probably the most example of where I truly believe, like, no, these guys are just these 10 chess moves ahead of each other, perfect block, perfect parry, perfect block, perfect parry. But I do have a preference for the hand-to-hand. I think that comes from my own background of just preferring martial arts with that kinetic impact, preferring being able to get fist and bone. It's kind of why I don't like, in anime, for example, mech fights and stuff, because there's like a level of detachment there. There's like the level of like the intimacy is lost for back of a lot of time. Like when you really have two characters like beating the hell out of each other, it's kind of like the closest thing they can do to each other except for fucking, you know, as like a physical relationship. It's like, it really tells you a lot, especially when it's like a back and forth even one. It's such a bond maker. It's such like you've been through hell with this specific person and they know you in a way. that other people have because they've brought you that
That
love.
reminds me of a
and
joke, if you'll allow me.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Did you know that boxers don't have sex before a fight?
Yeah.
You know why?
I could give you the reason why, but go ahead.
It's because they don't like each other like that. That's why they're fighting, Alfie.
Funny. Honestly, if they did that more, we'd get a lot less brain injury.
I just fucking love that one so much.
It's a good one, yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I think there's an interesting point there about the intimacy, and so, like, when you add, range to that, so the closest you can get is probably, like, knives or swords or what have you. Then you can get further away with, like, your gun fu kind of movies like John Wick and Equilibrium and such. I'm trying to think if there's... I feel like... I don't know if this counts as a fight scene. Like, this kind of becomes an interesting point. How far away can two characters be before it's not a fight scene anymore? Because I've seen, like, archer or, like, sniper battles, and I'd probably consider those to be a fight scene. Or, like, how far removed is it just two, like... If it's one person versus a group of guys, that's a fight scene, right? Like, if it's all hands, that's still clearly a fight scene. If it's, like, 10 people all versus each other, it's still a fight scene. But, like, you wouldn't call, like, I don't know, fucking Wrath of Khan's ending battle a fight scene, right? Like, because, they're in a ship and it's a battle, very, like, submarine-esque combat. But, like, it's not a fight scene, right? So where's that line exactly? It's not the number of people. And if you can do, like, sniper battles all the way across a fucking, like, city from each other and still consider that a type of a fight, like, where the fuck is is it just scale?
I don't know, because I feel like the kind of rule I was going to give you was going to be both parties have to be in immediate physical danger for it to be a fight scene, right? But the Wrath of Khan scene you gave in a battle like that, there is still immediate physical danger, right? If you go to Return of the Jedi, like the fleet battle at the end of that, right? That is still the people, if they mess up a shot or something like that, they can still hate each other, right? Even though it is, like, again, this effectively naval warfare at that point. So I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question, because I would classify, like, sniper battles as a fight scene. I'd even classify sometimes if you have two people on opposite ends of the world directing their followers to fight each other and they're in battle. All right, I guess what my thing is, there needs to be some form of communication between the people exchanging things. There needs to be some form. It doesn't have to be direct, I'm talking to you directly, but they have to be sending immediate back and forth messages with each other. Because at the end of the day, in a story, what is a punch if not but someone enforcing their will over someone else and then the other person responding? It's a conversation, right? That's how we write fight scenes, is you write it like a conversation. Like, someone's winning, someone's turning it around, etc., etc. I think that would apply basically on any scale you choose, as long as there is an immediate personal response. I think the moment it gets so abstract to where you have, for example, let me give like an example where what one of those wouldn't count. When you've got like a villain who sends out their minion to kind of arbitrarily cause chaos or fight the person, like in Batman Returns, where like the Penguin sends his minions out to fight the citizens of Gotham, and Batman takes all his minions, the Penguin at the end. That's not a fight scene. Like, there's no interaction to them until the very end, you know? Like, there's no feedback there. But I feel like the moment you have kind of an intense person-to-person interaction, even if that person has a group with them, even if that person they're interacting at the moment is just like a nameless goon, there's still some level of individual versus individual, and I think that's probably the rule, and that can expand out to any scale you want. You can do Galactus versus the Source, right? And it's still a fight scene, even if they're fighting with ideas, right? Even if it's fighting on this completely abstract plane.
That's an interesting thought of like how physical does it have to be, and like how much physical danger is there? Because like there's like really well shot and intense like game and chess scenes.
Yes, and I would count.
Yeah, because like it's filmed to feel like a fight scene, even though I got in a real bad fight today, Ma. I had to take the guy's queen. It just wouldn't really work. But you say.
Did you ever see the Queen's Gambit?
No, I've not watched it. No, I know of it.
So there was the running joke while that was going around that it was basically a shonen anime because how they shot the chess matches were very much like shonen tournament arc, like level ass, like if I move my rook over here, he won't be coming. Like, it was exactly the same thing.
That's so funny. Everything is a shonen anime. The Bible is a shonen anime.
It can be, man. You can I would pay as many good money to see a shonen ass adaptation of Jesus, but he's like, I'm gonna be the Messiah.
The fucking anime opening ends with the crucifixion. It's like, spoilers.
Judas does the glasses shine pull up.
Christ, the anime. Or is it just the whole Bible? The whole Bible would be more fun.
You do the whole Bible, yeah. You make it like a One Piece level epic. You just do 1,000 chapters of that thing.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. Yeah, I think there's interesting levels of like how. So yeah, the chess thing, right? It's like at that point you're filming it like a fight scene. So the thing that came to mind for me wasn't wasn't Queen's Gambit. It was again Sherlock Holmes with Robert Downey Jr. the second one, where you get to the end and they're having a chess game together and they're being so civil and they're sitting there like planning how they're gonna fucking take each other down the whole time. So it's like kind of blending those two ideas together, and it heightens what the game is at that point. They did Moriarty too quick. No wonder they never made a third one of those. It was too good. You need to build up to Moriarty more, I think.
I agree.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting to consider how you could or how far you can take certain things and like where the limit breaks down. And I think what it is it's determined by the like the very visceral limited fight itself. So like the language of the fight scene gets put into the context of other scenes that you wouldn't initially think of as fight scenes. Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie had a really interesting one of those where it starts as a fight, but then it like slowly transitions into them having sex and like being actually open with each other for the first time in their relationship because they were both each other's cover. So I think like that's an interesting one, and I'm trying to think of it. I'm sure I've seen it, but it's not coming to mind for me. I'm sure there exists sex scenes that are filmed like a fight scene.
I mean, that's the same thing that to take it to the comic example of that, like Frank Miller, his whole thing was that was he was all about the idea that he didn't like the idea of superheroes being with non-superheroes because he said, well, if their fight scenes are against other supervillains, why would their sex scenes not be against other super characters as well? So the whole reason he created Elektra is because he wanted to create a superhero sex life that matched what he thought their operatic fights would be, which is again exactly the same thing you're talking about. Is like is that level of intimacy, is that level of thing, and I think there are other that, where you see that progression, someone winning over the other person, flipping the odds, etc., back and forth, and then there's always a climax, there's a final punch, that last of effort, which is funny to think about it in that way.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know, it's kind of fun to think about like that language of the fight scene getting kind of co-opted to communicate different things about certain characters in other types of stories, other types of beats. I think it's like a cool way to utilize the language and the conventions. So it's always fun to see stuff like that. I'm trying to think of other things that are worth talking about with fight scenes because we've been talking for about an hour. We're about 20 minutes shy of episode length, I think.
Do you have any favorite fight scenes like that immediately comes to your mind? Is like, this I love. It can be from any medium.
So Vegeta versus Goku in the Saiyan saga is just fucking fantastic. Luke versus Vader in Return of the Jedi is another one that I really, really love. There's just so many emotions going on in that scene. It's still really slow, and like neither of those actors actually know what they're doing with a sword, but it's still like there's just all the emotional buildup is there.
You prefer that to the Empire one?
I mean, I like the Empire one still, but like I wouldn't like the Return of the Jedi one more if not for the Empire one, but it's just the culmination of it. It's the final fight of the original trilogy, so it kind of has that thing, and like it just ends in like that perfect, satisfying way. He's surpassed his father, but he's also not going to fall like his father did, and then you just get the iconic exchange with the Emperor. There's just so much built into that. It's not necessarily just the fight itself, but like everything's revolving around the fight, which is so cool. Oh, I think we talked about this a little bit in the past. For a video game, it's such a weird pull, but it's just like such a cool visual and such a cool dynamic for a game to have pulled off. And I don't think I've really like seen it done in the same way, or at least not had it feel the same. Though I'm not much of a gamer, so the final fight. Or the final boss, I should say, in Crash Bandicoot 3. And I know that sounds so silly, because like Crash is not a franchise really even known for its boss fights in particular, but like that's the one where you have the two masks, Crash mask and Cortex's mask, and they're fighting in the center of the screen at first, and you're fighting Cortex around them, and like technically it's just more environmental damage like any fucking boss fight has ever had, but because it's two other characters fighting and you're kind of like fighting your own boss at the same time, it just has such a cool and unique and different feel that I don't think, at least off the top of my head, I don't think I've immediately seen captured anywhere else, and it just made it feel really epic. And so just as the fight continues, like their fight keeps expanding and moving like across the screen and around the screen in ways that you just have to like kind of juggle. And I just think that's such a cool dynamic to put into a video game fight.
That does sound really cool.
Yeah, I think I showed it to you years ago now, and it's just like...
I think you did, yeah.
But I really fucking love that fight. Do you have any video game fights that like really stand out to you?
Yeah. So basically, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, which is the title of all time, but it's a spin-off of Metal Gear, focused on one of the main of the side characters, Raiden, and the whole game is basically cool action. But the final boss of that fight, of that game, oh my god. You've probably seen this GIF, at least parodied somewhere, because it's so famous. But basically, you start off against this guy, he's like the senator villain, right? And you fight him in this big, like, spider which is already big enough to be a final boss in of itself. And you take it down, you cut it apart, and you're like, all right, I did it. And then he walks out of it, and he's in just this regular suit, and he just like activates these nanites that are in his body that like buff him up Broly style. And they do like health bar in percentages, right? So you're fighting him this entire time, and do all these hits, and his health bar goes like 1%. 2%, 3%. You're doing like nothing to this guy the whole time, and it keeps escalating and escalating and escalating until you get the sword of like your old friends. Like this whole fight takes like an hour to take down, and the whole time he's laying out these like philosophical speeches against you and stuff. Oh, it's fantastic. The soundtrack's fantastic. The presentation's fantastic. It's probably the most like, oh my god, how am I gonna beat this guy feeling you'll ever get in any video game ever. Extremely hype. So I love it. It's very famous, very memed for a reason. But it's so good. So that's definitely the video game example I can think of off the top of my head. Just such a really good executed thing. In terms of like other like kind of like more in the same vein as like your Crash take, I really like at the end of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, when you do the Knuckles campaign and you fight Mecha Sonic and he goes on the Master Emerald and he goes super, and this whole game you've been using the Chaos Emerald to be invincible and kind of bully other enemies. At least that's how I play it. And then he does it, and then he's invincible to you, and it feels like, oh no, I have no way of stopping this guy. It's like such a great reversal of something the player has abused now has to fight himself, and just getting to fight one of Eggman's robots in a super form is just such a cool ass visual, and the music's great. So those would be my two examples I think are phenomenal.
Yeah. You talking about the Mecha Sonic thing made me think. I remember someone pitched the idea for a video game where you just are the final boss and you keep having to deal with the hero character coming back. No matter how many times you kill them, they just keep coming back and like getting slightly better every time, and like learning your patterns, and like you can only attack in so many ways. Like I just thought that was such an interesting premise for a video game. I don't know if it could be like
really cool idea.
Like a long-term console 60-hour campaign, but just like as a mobile game or something, I think that would be really fucking fun.
No, I think that sounds fantastic. Yeah. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, like on that like Tetris level of everyone eventually loses. It's just how long can you go for?
Yeah.
So I think that would be like a really cool premise for like a game. Yeah, video game fights are interesting because it's just, you know, we have the whole idea of boss mechanics. Like almost every video game has some type of boss, and they're just all formulated around the idea of fighting them and beating them down in some way, shape, or form. So if only we had someone that was more into games that could talk longer about these kind of things, but alas, it's just not meant to be. I'll put Crash in the fucking thumbnail, and if Matt doesn't watch this video, I'm going to take it as a personal slight, but that's just me.
Do it.
What is the most that Matt Kid coded thumbnail I could possibly make?
If you put Crash and Mecha Sonic in it, he's absolutely going to be like, wait a minute.
Just imagining Matt sitting there like they're fucking talking about me and I don't like it.
Yeah, he's like, hold on. Hold on.
I am not that predictable, damn it.
Yeah, funny.
Yeah. Other like fight scenes I really like in different things. I'll just do it because I have to. I really like the fights that we get in Green Lantern Emerald Knights. I've talked about this a lot, but the Lyra story in that is really good, and all of that is just like Muscle Tower style fight scene, or Game of Death style fights where she's just descending to the planet, and so like first she has to fight her sister or mother-in-law or whatever it is, then she has to fight her brother, then she has to fight her father, and like the fights get like more epic as she goes, but also like increasingly more emotional and sad. because she's taking on her fucking family because they were like decided to become war criminals. It's just like the most fucking tragic thing, and like again, just for me, it's always about the emotions. Like as cool, and this is something else I want to talk about. As cool as a fight scene, like the choreography or just like the actual action can get, that only works so far for me. What I really need is I need some kind of emotional connection to the characters. Otherwise, I might as well just grab some toys and bash them together, and I get like the same feeling out of it. So like a really good example of that is in that fight scene with her father. Like it starts with her just talking to him, and he's looking at like this little fucking Fabergé egg that opens up and like plays a home video hologram of them when she was a little girl and he was, being a dad. And then like as they fight, they like go through a room and there's a shelf of those things and they like bump the shelf, and so all of them open at once and you just start seeing like their fucking life together, and now it's this. And it's just so sad, man.
That's rough.
It's such like a beautiful fucking moment though, to kind of get that. So I really, really like that one. But yeah, something I do want to transition and talk about is when you just have a fight that is nothing but action and has no emotion to it. So I think like a lot of Michael Bay's movies come down to this, where people be like, oh, how could you not like those movies? They're so awesome. Like, yeah, what they're doing is awesome, but I don't give a fuck because I don't know who any of these characters are. They're not actual people, right? Like,
yeah.
Of course they're not. They're fictional characters. Yeah, but I don't feel like they're actual characters. They just are excuses to have things bang into each other. I'll probably get some flack for this. This is my biggest problem with most Godzilla movies. I don't give a fuck about the people most of the time in the movies because they're poorly written and kind of like excuses for the plot to happen. And then by the time you get to the giant monster fight that you feel like you've been waiting all the fucking movie for, I no longer care about the giant monster fight because now it's just boring spectacle, and I've sat through a fucking hour and a half of some fucking nonsensical plot with characters that don't actually matter and don't feel human.
Yeah. I feel you as well with a lot of, like, I think that's the weakness of a lot of things that I'd be really interested to see. I hope, did you see Godzilla -1 by any chance?
No.
Okay, so the director of that did a really, really good Godzilla movie that's very heartfelt and using Godzilla as a metaphor for survivor's guilt, effectively. And what I'm more interested about that is because every really good Godzilla tends to have Godzilla just as a solo act, I think to avoid the problem that you're talking about. But the next one he wants to do, he's very specifically stated, I really want to do a Godzilla movie that has the giant monster fight and the emotional power context, and he wants to use the Ghidorah for that. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to see that as well, to see if you can do it, because I don't think those things need to be separate. I think that you can do both.
Yeah, I would like to see that happen. I don't particularly care for a lot of the Legendary movies. I liked them, like, upon initial watch, but they've not really stuck with me in any, like, meaningful way. So it would be nice to see someone kind of, thread the needle and actually make me give a shit about the giant monster movie. I like the giant monsters in concept, but I never like the actual movies. The only Godzilla thing I've ever really enjoyed was the Half-Century War. And that's because they did a really good job of actually just creating a real character and getting you invested in, like, the actual story. I remember when Manos and I were doing the fan project reviews, we did a Godzilla one. And it was like, legitimately, it was really impressive what they managed to, like, pull off, getting, actors in suits, and, like, they got basically, I'm trying to think of what to compare it to. But they basically got, like, every Godzilla monster to be in one fan film together, which just on, like, a fan film scale is so crazy and impressive. But the thing is, like, an hour and a half long, and it just, 30 minutes in, I just don't give a shit anymore. because it's just so exhausting to watch. None of the characters actually matter, and as impressive as it is for a fan project to pull off getting all of these suits and filming all of this stuff, it just doesn't matter. Like, you can only invest in that so much. You gotta get a story to keep people coming back.
Yeah, I feel yeah.
Spectacle only goes so far. Like, there's that really funny Todd McFarlane video where he's like, or quote where he's like, "I could sell you a comic written by my mother but painted by Leonardo da Vinci, but I could not sell you a comic written by Shakespeare painted by my mother." And I'm like, I don't know, man. I feel like I could probably do with the other one better, like, I just...
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci only gets you so far. Like, it's, it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. Oh, wow, that's pretty. And then you're kind of over it.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a challenge. How bad can you make the visuals but still just have a banger fucking story? Or people just have to tune out.
I feel like there's probably like a bunch of examples of that.
Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting one. That's getting further and further away from fights. I don't know. I think we're kind of wrapping up, unless you had any other final ideas you wanted to talk about regarding this.
No, I think you're pretty much on the money. I think just the things that I would advocate for more in fights is really spend the time to let your actors learn as much as the choreography as possible. Really prep that thing ahead of time. I think the example you said up front about like the Marvel movie climaxes, I think the one that stands out to me the most is like something that really hurts that film is the ending of Black Panther. Is that final fight is really rough compared to the rest of that movie, and it sticks out as a result. It's just make sure they have enough time and make sure they have enough of a reason for why the action is happening beyond, oh, it's getting a little too emotional, we should probably have an action scene here at some point, like justify it through your characters. It's not hard, and then get creative with it. Don't just use it as a mandatory thing. Use it as a tool. Use it as something that you can use to demonstrate a reason of the characters, so people don't just, if they're not already into fight scenes, don't just feel like they skip past, or if the people who are into fight scenes are going to be disappointed if they feel like, oh, it's just a generic action scene where two people punch each other for a little bit. Like, there's always a new angle to it. There's always a new thing you can add to these elements. And you don't have to be completely reinventing the wheel. Sometimes if you just serve something we've seen before, but really excellently done, bully it up. There's only so many times you can show a punch to the face, right? But a really well executed punch to the face is always going to hit. So, like, I feel like that's also a skill. So, pace them well, plan them well, and try and infuse them with some character. It doesn't have to be a lot, but just if you're using someone, if you're using a superhero character or any kind of action character, any character really in a fight scene, try to think about what makes that character unique for fights and play to their strengths rather than forcing them to be something that they're. If you're using Superman, use his powers and his unique abilities and his unique strengths in a way that only Superman could do that fight. If you're using James Bond, play up why does James Bond fight this way, etc. and etc. And I think that's where you get the really special stuff.
I'd agree. I think we'll just end things there. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am the Geek for fun. I'm the champion of the oppressed.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.